This week, I watched the new release Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, and the premise of this video is that I want to compare Furiosa to the film Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior. Now, Furiosa is a CGI action fest that clocks in at around 2.5 hours, and maybe it's just me, but every time something was CGI in this film, I think I could instantly tell. It just seemed really obvious, and at one point I'm pretty sure they CGI'd dogs jumping off the back of a truck. The CGI wasn't that bad. It wasn't like the CGI from Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but that to me is what it looked like. Not horrible CGI, but like I wasn't looking at anything real. In stark contrast, Mad Max 2 was made in 1981. I don't think it used CGI at all, and everything looks gritty, real and lived in. When I looked at this still from the movie, a thought hit me. The leather armour, the look, the wasteland, the dog. All of this reminded me a lot of Fallout, and when I went to check, it does appear that Mad Max was supposedly one of the primary inspirations for the game series. On the flip side, Furiosa does have some nice cinematography, and the director makes nice use of symbolism in a way that reminds me of Alfred Hitchcock. In one scene, a young girl suffers a loss and drops a toy as if to symbolise lost childhood. In another, a lizard crawls out of a human skull, eats an insect, and the skull is then run over by a vehicle, maybe to symbolise the interaction of technology and man that led us to this wasteland. And all of that is CGI because of course it is. The action, however, in Furiosa just doesn't stop, and shouldn't that be a good thing? Well, that will depend entirely on you. The action never stopping means the film doesn't spend any time really on atmosphere building or characters or girly stuff like that, like Mad Max 2 does. It means if you're going to get character moments, they will likely be during an action scene and two characters maybe trying to build a heartwarming father-daughter relationship, all while an unfeasible amount of motorbikes are crashing into paragliders. This is the chronological order of the Mad Max films, by the way, and what even is this continuity? Somewhere between Mad Max 2, where fuel was so scarce that Max had to try and dab petrol off of the road with a rag and a tin hat, whereas in Furiosa we have a refinery that appears to be sat on a lake of oil. Oh, and all of the roads disappeared somewhere between Mad Max 2 and Furiosa, and Max also became British. Furiosa does develop through the story as a character, but it's not really shown or told, it's more just implied. For example, she learns car repair in the story. They show the start of her in one class, then the story advances by an unknown amount of years, and by the next scene, she's now an expert. She learns to use weapons too, I've no idea how, and the film is not going to tell me, because we have another CGI set piece to do instead. The film is 2.5 hours long and managed to feel to me both overstuffed and like important parts of the story were still missing. To tell everything properly, they maybe could have taken 4 to 5 hours. The film contains a 40-day wasteland, or well, kind of. It's covered in a couple of minutes with a voiceover and it all happens off camera. As well as Furiosa's whole life story, being kidnapped as a child, growing up, becoming a warrior, seeking revenge, and finally getting it. And hang on! Isn't that the plot outline to Conan the Barbarian? It is. That's the plot outline to Conan the Barbarian, and that in some ways is symbolic of the movie. Furiosa is kind of the gender-swapped Max, for all the difference there is between the characters, but a main sticking point for me is that Anya Taylor-Joy, playing Furiosa, barely talks and barely emotes in over 2.5 hours of film. You see this face? I hope you like it exactly like that, because she will barely change it for over 2.5 hours. Mel Gibson for me put in a far better performance in Mad Max 2. Mad Max 2 as a story feels very small and self-contained in comparison. Max starts the film as a shadow of a man who's lost everything including his humanity. He just exists and survives like an animal. On the road in his V8 Interceptor, he's attacked by a group of raiders. He causes 2 of them to crash so he can salvage their vehicles for fuel. Max is an anti-hero at best. The other 2 raiders back away. One is called Wes, being played by Vernon Wells, who is ludicrously memorable for me for how few lines he gets in this film.
You can run, but you can't hide!
Max's journey leads him to strike up an unusual friendship with a man who tries to rob him, and he takes hostage and lets live in return for information of a settlement that refines gasoline and is under siege by the same group of raiders, led by a warlord called Lord Humongous. All Max wants is to find a way into that town, get gasoline and leave, and somewhere along the way he ends up saving the people of the town and instead finds a spark of his humanity. Furiosa is a film that left me with real mixed feelings. Now, Mad Max as a franchise, I really like. Kind of. What I mean is that I love Mad Max 2. It's one of my favourite films. For me, it's kind of perfectly formed as a piece of art. So imagine my excitement when I got around to watching the follow-up movie, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And since then, I found it very hard to get beyond Thunderdome. Furiosa also suffered badly to me due to the prequel problem, in a way that Mad Max 2 didn't. This movie sits before Fury Road and after Beyond Thunderdome, and that's a problem. Because a lot of the characters in Fury Road are in this movie, so you know Furiosa will live through this film. You know she'll lose an arm because she turns up in Fury Road very much alive and minus one arm. You know Immortan Joe is going to be fine throughout this film. You know Rictus Erectus, played by Nathan Jones, is going to be fine. He's back in this 2024 film, a prequel to a movie from 9 years ago, and he looks considerably older in the prequel than he does in the sequel that happens shortly after it. Similarly, characters who are not in Fury Road, well, that kind of tells me they're not going to make it, doesn't it? Chris Hemsworth is also in the film. He's playing the leader of a vicious motorcycle gang, playing a character called Dementus, who plays a similar role in this story to that Lord Humongous does in Mad Max 2, and everything about Chris Hemsworth in this role baffled me. Hemsworth, by most estimations, is a good looking guy. A lot of ladies like him, so first bad decision, let's make him the bad guy. Stick a stupid prosthetic nose on him and make him talk in a high-pitched bogan accent like he's Captain Boomerang.
It's time to take what's rightfully ours!
And I'm sat here thinking, why have they done this? He played the character like an unhinged madman, and I found it hard to see anyone following him like that. Seriously, why is Hemsworth not playing Mad Max? Hemsworth is a natural leading man, a big star in his own right. He's Australian, and that for me is a big part of what Max should be. Notably, an overtly Australian. Probably the best actor in the entire film is not playing the lead in Furiosa. Watching the film, I was more interested in what Furiosa's friend, Praetorian Jack's story was than I was in Furiosa. The whole sequence with Praetorian Jack and everything about him baffled me. Furiosa escaped captivity in the story and pretended to be a boy, and somehow nobody noticed for years. Immortan Joe is obsessed with collecting women to try and birth healthy children. That's why he demanded Furiosa in the first place from Dementus. So despite her value to them, the film never shows them look for her when she goes missing. She then stows away on a war rig, helps Praetorian Jack against raiders and ends up on his crew. And why has Immortan Joe accepted Furiosa in this position? The film again never shows us. The film never showed us most of the story. I have no idea why there are just random Roman terms thrown into this story either. Why is a guy that drives a truck a Praetorian? Who were the personal guards to the Roman emperors? Why is Furiosa doing the same job but she's an imperator? Now the word imperator was used for a military commander in Republican Rome, or later an emperor of Rome. I have no idea. It's also the male version of the word as opposed to the female. A female commander or empress would be an imperatrix. Mad Max 2 was a lot more simple in its story, but it had everything the story needed. It was made with a budget of an estimated $2 million. Furiosa cost an estimated $168 million. Furiosa is a Mad Max film that doesn't have Mad Max in it. Well, I think you see his back for a few seconds in the movie, and people do expect Mad Max to be in a Mad Max movie, more so if you're going to sell the film using his name. Instead, the movie focuses on the character Furiosa, who's in Mad Max Fury Road being played by Charlize Theron, and I wasn't even really keen on the character in that. She seemed to have a permanent resting B face, and this may be partly due to Theron and her co-star, Tom Hardy, playing Max, having by most accounts a very bad working relationship. This article in the Spanish newspaper El País describes their feud. The director said Tom Hardy has a damage to him, but also a brilliance that comes with it, and whatever was going on with him at the time, he had to be coaxed out of his trailer, whereas Charlize Theron was incredibly disciplined, a dancer by training which told in the precision of her performance, and always the first one on set, said Miller. Camera operator Mark Gurnicht recalls an explosive episode that definitively ignited the tension between the actors. Quote, "I remember vividly the day. The call on set was 8 AM. Charlize got there right at 8 AM. Sat in the war rig knowing that Tom's never going to be there at 8, even though they made a special request for him to be there on time. He was notorious for never being on time in the morning. If the call time was in the morning, forget it. He didn't show up," he said. Gurnicht remembers that hours passed and Hardy had still not appeared, while Theron stayed put in the war rig, not leaving even to go to the bathroom. Quote, "Tom turns up and he walks casually across the desert. She jumps out of the war rig and starts swearing her head off at him, saying, 'Fine the effing C $100,000 for every minute that he's held up this crew, and how disrespectful you are.' She was right, full rant. She screams it out, it's so loud, it's so windy. He might have heard some of it, but he charged up to her and went, 'What did you say to me?' That was the turning point for Theron, who after that incident requested protection. Tom Hardy frankly sounds like a very unusual guy. On one film, he reportedly used to wrestle with Shia LaBeouf all the time, and this is how LaBeouf describes one particular incident. Quote, "My girlfriend at the time was over at my house and we were on the balcony and we saw Tom Hardy and his trainer come back from the gym. We used to F with each other all the time. It just so happened one week my girlfriend is in town and Tom Hardy runs into the room. He picked me up and I didn't have nothing on, so now I'm naked on his shoulder and we're in the hallway and we're wrestling around. Tom Hardy ended up falling down some stairs and hurting his back, all while wrestling with a nude Shia LaBeouf." What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Furiosa. Now, I didn't like Furiosa and Fury Road, and now I'm getting a 2.5-hour movie about her life. Great. From here on in, I'll be getting into spoilers. The two films, Furiosa and Mad Max 2, start out in similar ways with a voiceover that describes the world setting, and it's not my favourite way to start a film. It is, however, a very quick way to do it. If you haven't got a huge budget, it's a way to get to a post-apocalyptic story without having to show the apocalypse. A better way of doing it for me is something like the movie Aliens, where you find out the setting naturally through characters talking. From there, Mad Max 2 has an action scene of Max in a car chase battling raiders, so it's an instant attention grabber. In contrast, Furiosa has a scene of a young girl picking what appear to be peaches. She's strayed too far from town, and while she's picking fruit, raiders have come and eaten her horse. She's from a town of all women, so I've no idea where all the kids are coming from. She tries to sabotage the raiders' bikes, but gets caught and kidnapped, and this for me was a mistake. For me, the film needed some scenes of her life in this town, so we know what she lost. The horse getting eaten also had little impact because we never saw it alive. Her mother tries to rescue her and loses her life in doing so, and it was an actress that made me do a double take because I saw her recently, of all things, in the romantic comedy Anyone But You, topless on a beach, and I even would have preferred a story about her instead of Furiosa. At least she's Australian. It's baffling to me that these two films, Furiosa and Mad Max 2, were written and directed by the same man. I can't really feel for the character because even after watching two films with Furiosa in them, I have no idea who she is.
Mother, you're alive.
Too bad you
Will die.